What's up, my friends? Happy full moon. Happy super moon. Happy full moon. Happy super moon in Taurus. And opposed, obviously, Sun Scorpio. 'Tis the season. So there is some one-on-one per sign that I just put out. On TikTok, coming to YouTube, I promise. Um, full moon, super moon, and Taurus. Taurus is such an interesting nature. And there's also a meteor shower and super moon, super close, super big, super bright. There's a lot going on in the sky. There's a retrograde coming. There's a lot of retrogrades to begin with. Jupiter is very noticeable in the sky. So make a wish and also look upon it, bask in it, despite the lore, and see what you find in the sky. Let it inspire you. For Taurus being such a grounded nature, there's so many other influences that I think very much create a fricative nature. And so there's a lack of grounding, a lack of earth bound or earth binding, a lot of practice because of that, because people sense that it's lacking in the air. I think that's also maybe like the spirit of recession, like the spirit of lack sort of permeating in a way, which is a very uncomfortable place for Taurus to be. But that is not to say that it is also not lending a hand in the energy to provide a stable environment amidst the to and fro. Um, it's an interesting like visual too, because it's like expansion of the universe in all directions, but there is a stable point. Um, it's like how you can pat your head and rub your belly at the same time. It's like the point where those two things may intersect. Like cogs in a machine, like Jupiter, and taking advantage of that is very much like a work cogs in a machine kind of thing, rather than fluid patterns. But both things can be true. And so with that, immediately I noticed that there's an interesting sort of trine of energies within Jupiter, Venus, and Mercury. Jupiter always already coming up, Jupiter in Cancer, which is water energy, that very much pushes back against grounding, especially against resistance in general. Like if Taurus is the rock, then Jupiter is also a wave of emotions. It's beating down on it, asking it to move, or pushing it in some way, shape, or form. Both things are true. Move with water, but also work and things, and value, and all of the things that Jupiter stands for, and the ways in which we're seeing that fluctuate in our world. Nobody can lie to us about inflation anymore. That long cycle. That water energy is charge and current, so it can also lend a hand to the kind of patterns that you want to really kick off. That's so funny. I mean, stay in school for sure while you're into it rather than skip it just to be here. But you should invest in yourself in all ways, and make time for as much as possible. Um, Not to say overdo it, but make time for what matters. Uh, uh, Current and currency also, again, kind of leading back to what we're seeing in value systems, and the ways that energy flows, intentionally a play on words, intentionally something that can play within both fields. And again, you have this to and fro, this east and west. That is also to say, it is not just your currency and value, or your vibration or whatever, because there's very much a hierarchical system within that ideology as well. creating its own value of elitism within high and low vibration rather than understanding and integration, as if everything can't be recycled, hence the toroidal nature. But your energy and your attention and your focus, it is, everything's changing. So it is easy to get sort of suckered into hunking down and sort of losing yourself in the hibernation of transition rather than continue the building. Um, and it leads to a lot of restlessness despite the lack of motivation. So be mindful of where you put your attention and be mindful of how you value uh, the ways in which you disperse that resource of yours and the ways in which you recharge that resource of yours. And that also uh, internally will reflect the external. Internal peace and prosperity does reflect a physical and literal auric and manifested vibration around you. So Jupiter is lending a hand, but it's also a bit of a tough lover. And there's very much ways that I think we can see, especially with the building of work camps and publications and documentation of that, finding out, missing people, not knowing where they're going, some knowing exactly where they're going, and not necessary, not necessary. Um, or in general, I've noticed just about everywhere is working understaffed and bare bones, and the ways in which Jupiter is taken advantage of. So be very clear about your value system, and nobody will be able to take advantage of that, um, because it will feel so starkly in contrast with your internal values. This is where your own internal moral compass comes in handy. Anarchy and expiry, my friend. I'm moving on within Venus. Scorpio assists in this understanding for sure. That's not the sign proper, but it definitely assists in where this energy is moving. And it assists in understanding. So find out where Scorpio is for you. And where that doesn't resonate, perhaps there's also, a tertiary aspect to it. So, fun fact, look into Ophiuchus. Fun fact, look into other forms of patterning. It really is all a cycle of harmonies. And it really just is the physics and possibility. So there's various ways you can get invested into an ideation of how you internalize and externalize Venus qualities and the ways in which you find value in beauty and the ways in which you find value in the things that you love and the ways in which those things also give back to you when you give to them. Um, Much in the same ways that maybe not my favorite paintings, but the most releasing are the ones that often people are very gravitated towards. Um, and it's similar things. It's kind of the unexpected turns. It's a very serpent-like nature. Along this with Mercury, which will come with a retrograde soon. I believe the ninth. I could be wrong. Um, and so there's very much nothing wrong with taking a second look or second draft at these patternings or reevaluating or perhaps trusting that you're getting a second sign or a second signal or a validation, a confirmation, a corroboration of patterns that you may or may not want. Um, Trust yourself even the first time you show yourself to yourself so that you can accurately evaluate, describe, navigate, move with it. This is also where intuition comes in handy uh, because sometimes the first thought is a programmed thought. And so we have to be able to know the difference. Um, and that starts with deprogramming. Mercury in retrograde is very much like maybe a positive opportunity for that in the midst of so much harsh misadvantage and misaligned Jupiterian vibes for some. Or, I mean, for all, but universal work strike. Um, let's see. Neptune and Saturn are also retrograde, which I think is very much your dreams, your past, past, experiences, the, memes and jokes about laying awake at night and remembering that thing you did in like third grade or whatever it is, but also past life timelines. Um, your memory is such an interesting thing. Um, but that doesn't mean that you cannot trust it. Sometimes we have to trust our creativity just the same, and the ways in which your memory, pieces things together as well. Um, these things weave together. And so, whether or not you believe in past life, for sure, there's, small interactions that add up in our lives and we don't really realize that it's collected dust in the corners. Um, but for sure, I've also gained a lot of awareness and understanding possibilities of timelines outside of this one. And especially within mental health diagnoses, it's helped me to understand levels of intensities and perhaps a reason outside of myself that I can, and still within myself, honestly, um, where I can sort of step back and be like, okay, let me not let this derail the motivations that I have, the passions that I have, da 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 da. And it creates sort of an element of forgiveness because there is a level of unity there. Um, funny. Uh, Uranus is on the fence on Gemini, which is very undecided for the debater, very on the fence, if you will. But I think rather than that, navigating left or right, navigating up or down independently, again, the like that thing, um, is very much about expanding your awareness instead of uh, climbing the ladder of hierarchical frequency. Perhaps you've spent your time trying to raise your vibration. Now is the time to expand your awareness instead. Um, Maybe go back down the ladder and see how much of a struggle bus that is for you. Go back down the ladder. Build it back up again. Um, the highest frequency would be one that can understand the lowest frequency and liberate it simultaneously. So don't get too ahead of yourself and get off your high horse, uh, myself included. I'm always attempting to expand my awareness and understand the dark parts, even if that alienates or isolates me, or makes me a fearful figure some would describe as an enemy. That is okay. I am merely a lover, similar to our dear Samael or Lilith or any other elemental energy for sure. It's interesting to me how people can embrace, earth element and earthbound conjure and ritual, but be so afraid of the shadows. Funny. Neptune, Uranus, and Chiron also have an interesting wave, an interesting trifecta together. Waves, and again, that fricative nature, that back and forth, waves of grief is very much what I got from that. And also waves of numbness, which will directly, I think, innervate with Uranus on this Gemini line. And, rather than picking a side, like trying to turn everything off, or rather than having their way, like just kind of rejecting everything, or but just kind of numbing themselves out from the intensity, however that may show up for you, um, because you don't want the extremes. And I get it, we don't want the extremes. Oh, in a real way, absolutely. Like that's not what we're voting for. Um, but within the waves of grief is a still point at the core of the flame in memory, which is why we light the hearth and we keep warm and we tell stories and we gather and we listen, not just speak. And so there is always a still point in the carrying of the back and forth. It does not have to bounce in between. Think of it like bowling with bumpers. How can you both be gentler on the bumpers with your thoughts and also direct your energy outside of that box of back and forth, outside of left and right, outside of this or that, outside of abstinence and sterility or indulgence and escape, outside of intensity or numbness, outside of fear and loathing or love and embrace. How queer of thought. So we pull some cards. We pull some cards and we show some grace to ourselves along with this beautiful Superman. Welcome, welcome. Screw you back a little bit. Cards right here. Down. Much like we are hanging out, you're more than welcome to take 3 deep breaths with me, tap into the moon, listen to anything that your body says or that may come through. That's interesting. That's fun. I get back and forth can be fun. Intense can be fun. But maybe we don't know the difference between like intensity and like actual romance. You know how they say that? Like just because it's, intense and passionate and like the sex is good doesn't necessarily mean that it's love. Um, but in general, I think a lot of our nervous system, a lot of our upbringing, a lot of our conditioning, a lot of our nervous systems don't necessarily know the difference. Don't necessarily know what it is that makes that tick for them or how to describe it. And it's interesting to me because again, I'm always kind of performing this social experiment, trying to like engage in understanding. And I love asking people like, questions about their relationships, but questions about love too, and these abstract concepts. And for the most part, not always. There's definitely people I know that do not abide by this. But for the most part, when I ask people, like, what is it that you love so much about your partner? They're like, they don't know. Or it's purely physical. Like they're hot, they're sexy, they turn me on. But I've asked that, like, what are your top favorite things, top 3 things that you like about your partner? And a lot of times it's just physical. And a lot of times when I ask people why they love somebody, they don't really know. They're just like, I just do. It's just the truth. It's just what it is. Which I think, already on, can't knock somebody if they know they know. I can't say I know anybody's body better than they do. But I do think there is a big difference between your body saying yes and your heart saying yes, and your mind saying yes versus your heart saying yes. And there is this big disunite. I think that's why people have such a difficult time with intimacy. Um, and so a big difference for me has been understanding um, what it's been like to, or what it would be like to love myself, and what I feel in those moments when I feel unified with myself, i.e., gooning to myself, perhaps, which has also been an interesting journey. What was I saying? Self love, blah 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 blah. Knowing the difference. Oh, and rather than it being necessarily that I feel it in my body, very literally, I'll feel it like in my fingertips and in like the back of my head, which is like a full activation of your nervous system, and it radiates rather than it just being like, oh, you just turn me on in very literal and visceral ways, rather than the surreal, rather than the dreamlike, rather than the totality. So maybe that's illuminatory for somebody, TMI for somebody else, I'm sure. Ooh, Queen of Swords. See, exactly. Softness. Lean into it. Lean into it. Um, I feel like it's very much, for as tough as some of us are, the tenderness that lies beneath that. Um, I think a Queen of Spades character has probably had to do a lot of work uh, to reconcile with their doubt so as to recognize the difference between like an actual problem and just doubt or just naysayers, um, and recognize what maybe belief really means to them. Unfortunately, that can be a double edged sword where some people also maybe lean too far into that and are wielding a sword too heavy for them rather than understanding that the balance lies within the hilt itself, not in the blade. And that is the way to wield it. Um, I love the Queen of Swords, even though a lot of traditional cartomancy maybe associates it with negativity in a lot of ways. Not that that's not also an aspect of it, but hard knowledge is sometimes the real good stuff. It's also a paradigm shift. It's also a rose-colored reality, which is a flip of the coin, really. Is a flip of the coin, depending on that doubt. Is it a desired reality or is it a rose colored nightmare? Um, eight of eight of spades, three of diamonds, four of diamonds. Okay. The simplest way that I can say this is, let's say the eight of spades is what you're running from. And the four of diamonds is where you want to run to. The three of diamonds is the stability or the skill to be able to get there. And the seeds that have been planted to be able to get there. So it is showing up to show that we have planted them. It is perhaps just recognizing them. But like very literally, it's like, if you're swimming away from like an explosion and to shelter and safety, um, the three of diamonds would be maybe the skill to swim, if not signal for help. Maybe there's boat coming. But my first inclination was the ability to tread water. The ability to tread water. And there's also interesting stories of people that have survived massive explosions or because of submerging themselves underwater, so as to bypass the burning in some way, shape, or form, in that way, shape, or form. And so that was kind of instantly what came to mind, was the ability to not even just tread water, but yes, tread water and submerge yourself under it so as to let the flame pass. And that I think is perhaps an ultimate piece that we have not entertained in a lot of ways. I mean, I imagine it's probably dramatically gorgeous. sublime, but in a metaphorical way. I think it's also how, rather than, constantly seeking um, better, or constantly seeking easy, we can find ease, and that assists us in even the most difficult times. Rather than seeking better, um, we can just understand growth, and offer that grace, and by patterning, that becomes better and better and better and better. So better suddenly becomes this like lackluster goal, when you expand it in that way. So understand the still points of yourself, and I think in a very real way, that's like, what does your breath look like, and what color is it, and how does it move? um when you breathe, do you feel the rhythm of its outpour and its flow in, like a wave, like a river? When you breathe, do you also feel the wave that exists north to south in your body? When you breathe, do you also know, with your eyes closed, what your breath looks like? Which, in a very fun little way, like, what's your favorite song right now? What color is it? Uh, if you could give your color a voice, or if you wanted to give your color a voice, what color would it be? Um, Sometimes that's a very inner visual way to give uh, life to feeling, perhaps. Um, and in that, you find refuge within yourself that carries you forth to safety, rather than constantly seeking safety in some other element. Uh, However that may go. And that's not to say asking for help isn't a good thing, or relying on anybody isn't a good thing. Um, that is to say, uh, the wound of betrayal can run deep, and so we must place trust in ourselves before we place trust in everyone else. We must be refuge to ourselves before we can seek to be refuge to other people. In that sense, the birds under the fire. Okay. Woo! I think people will also market this a lot as finding your passion. Uh, this energy, this tertiary solution, is often capitalized and manipulated. Oh, good one. The 3 is also your capacity. I'm just realizing that. Which is, yeah, treading water. It's the ability to hold itself or hold current or hold space. Hi, hello. Welcome. If you are new here, we like to engage with the moon. We're pulling a few cards. But not just for the moon. In general, you'd be surprised how much cartomancy can be a window into possibility, like a particle experiment, a particle collision experiment, a wave of possibility with potentials, depending on your frequency, of course, and what frequencies you want to tap into, and what frequencies you're willing to identify, because, like any good tool, there's also a window to the body, the energy, uh, collective energy, individual energy, spiritual energy, time, space, which is why I read tarot and in cartomancy. All right. Much like we're hanging out. Oh, I love that. 3 people and it was just 333. 33 is what it was. What was I saying? Oh yeah. Much like we're hanging out. Much like we're hanging out and we've got cards in between us. Um, if you would like to, take 3 deep breaths with me so we can tap into the moon, collective vibes, collective energies, and see what micro to macro the cosmic has to say. Take a deep breath in and exhale. Take a deep breath in and exhale. Deep breath in and exhale. That was much nicer than the first round. Gosh, and so much nicer than all of the. Thank you. Those are actually my paintings. Yes, that was much nicer the second time around. And just to carry over this idea of, if you're running from something towards something, rather than it be about the quickest path, if you're swimming across the river from an explosion to safety, how well can you tread water? It is a skill that we are going to need. You will be the capacitor for holding over as flames carry, as fricative nature carries. Um, the Eight of Wands is the bottom of the deck, which is that intensity. Um, and the key, something that is like hard to say, I guess, because it's a feeling. Um, it's like a space in between breath where you aren't really sure if you're breathing. And maybe that's just something I know because I do breath work a lot. I promise you. At some point, it doesn't feel like you're breathing. Um, it's kind of cool. But that's like a key point of being able to submerge yourself too as the flame passes. And so you have to like relax yourself and become dense but not too dense, and like I'm not a great floater, So shit, that's something I got to pick up. But that sensation of floating is hard to describe. But just within that breathing was very much what I was feeling. And so eight of wands at the bottom of the deck is intensity, like struck at us, but also the power with which we hold when we are able to find stillness within the intensity, when we are able to sort of ease ourselves into floating amongst the flame, I suppose, into floating beneath the flame. How interesting too, because yes, Taurus full moon, but all of this the other heavy planetary water energy is very much intense, but offering refuge. Again, both things can be true. Um, and it will pass. This too will pass. I know that's like a Bible thumper thing to say, and triggering for sure. But bear with me. In physics, I like to think that it's also just momentum, and for every downhill turn is an uphill swing, like a pendulum, right? And again, to and fro. But what is the still point? The still point is what carries the pendulum. Is in fact the weighted middle, and that is you. That is this three of diamonds, and that is also uh, the steadiness of breath. If you're going to balance anything, so that's very much an element of it too. Torture solutions rather than arguments too. The Emperor follows this. It's the world inverted, Nine of Cups, the Emperor inverted. And so I think, yes, the Emperor is like the rule setter for sure, but this is inverted. This is breaking some rules. This is, again, anarchy and expiry. I'm telling you, it's like life or death, or life and breath, or anarchy and expiry. Um, and it's not just breaking rules willy-nilly. It's breaking rules because they need to be broken. It's not just breaking rules, or obscenity for the sake of obscenity. It is, art for, learning and discomfort. It's not just for the sake of discomfort either. It's for the intent of growth. And so the emperor is willing to be a different perspective, and maybe the naysayer for something, but because he's willing to shift a paradigm, he's willing to offer um, a new mode of thought, a new way of light, a new cognitive motion, a new, activating pattern, a new sensory pattern, even. Um, and I promise you, even in the smallest of ways, uh, you can start to change up the way that your brain associates what's going on there. If you have any opportunity to try something with your left hand, go for it. Uh, that's going to be a door open into another perspective. And that's this emperor's role, is to offer a new perspective, um, and to be willing to ask questions. Because again, anarchy isn't anarchy's sake, as in like F the government, no rules, party on. Is party on. So try your right hand, try the less dominant in some way, shape, or form. The other perspective in some shape or form. And perhaps also because you are left-handed, maybe this is ways in which you can also trust your perspective despite the dominant perspective being something opposite. Um, for whatever you may be on the fence about, my friend. Da, 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 da. What was I saying? Oh, anarchy. Not anarchy for anarchy's sake. As in, the way that we've been taught about anarchy, that it is defined itself by the lack of government. But perhaps that isn't the case. Perhaps that's, much like you can't use the word in a definition, perhaps we shouldn't use the words antithesis in a definition either, because it conjoins the two. It conflates the two. Perhaps anarchy is more so about uh, sovereign responsibility. Um, what if we could live in a world where anarchy was defined by integrity and personal responsibility, and where people were able to understand what governing themselves meant, um, internally, and so that the benefit of all was the natural inclination, rather than conversely, capitalism and patriarchy dominated by toxic masculinity is very much stemmed from uh, exertion at all costs, and oftentimes at the expense of. It is maybe the lightest way I can say that, but that's also thanks to this card, because this is exertion at all costs. And you will not be the cost if you are this, if you are grounded within yourself. Use all of the other elements that are present and that are powerful to facilitate grounding in yourself. There's a lot of air, there's a lot of water. There's a lot of air, there's a lot of water. And in the air, there is also electrical current. So, yes, wire. That is why so many like Wi-Fi routers and lines will go underneath lakes and ponds and what have you. I have read that the Navy had Wi-Fi access on sea well before it was ever accessible to the public. So do with that information what you want. The Emperor would find a way to dig. Um, the world is also inverted in so many ways, shapes, and forms in a literal way, in a very multiplicant, multiplicated, and literal way. Uh, that is, in fact, gosh, this is gonna sound funny. Um, that is, in fact, like the spell of the world. There's a lot of people who, very much are diving into their religion or what have you, and there's very much people that are like, I'm lost as hell, or I'm overwhelmed because it feels like we're all under a spell or we're all under black magic. Da 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 da. I think we have to question our definition of black magic and our understanding, but also I think that that is true. Even people that people that have their wild beliefs, I think it is all very indicative that simulation theory is more and more probable. And I think the more I learn, hologram theory is more and more likely and probable. And that's not just to say externally; that is also to say internally. Your idea of reality and perception is in and of itself a hologram, like a camera lens, front to back, in to out. And the world around you is also fractal implications of, and sometimes not butt heads. Um, with that being said, again, understanding that you are the capacitor, uh, perhaps you are neither here nor there, but you are present, and that is a central point. There's actually a strange little note that I drew. Oh, can I show this to people? Will this show? What else is showing on this? Let's cover that. Bow, bow, bow. Can you see this tiny drawing? This tiny little drawing, my friend? And in it, it says, you are here. Bam, you are here, positive. You are also here, negative. But in reality, you are the capacitor, which is also not true because the capacitor is physical. In reality, you are the frequency. I'll show this to this other camera. Positive. This is an ohm circuit, right? Positive. You are here. This is where you think you are, or where you want to be. Negative. You are here, maybe where you think you are, or where you think you are currently. Maybe even you're a non-dualist and you're like, I've awakened. I'm actually the capacitor. This is my real frequency. Um, but you are not even that. You are not the body. You are not the mind. You are the spirit and the frequency of it, which is in fact the electrical current. You are there. Um, and that you can't really. I just have to take my notes and actually draw them bigger. Um, but it would be like a hologram inversion of the physical capacitor to equate the frequency. That is where you are in specific. So if you are lost, understand that you are neither here nor there. You are not the body or the mind. Um, and because of that, you are that much more powerful in your presence, and so you can continue to make a new pattern now. Like I know that it sucks and it's hard to hear. Like I can just close my eyes and wake up and I'm rich. That's not what I'm saying. Like I can just close my eyes and wake up and I'm all better. And that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that now is an opportunity to choose to do things differently, like a threshold past any door. You When you cross, you make a choice to enter into that perspective, even when that threshold is different or scary. Good. I'm glad that rings. I'm glad that makes sense. That's also why in a lot of cultures it's like bad, like poor manners to stand within a threshold because it shows like spiritual indifference. And you'll notice in bars or clubs where people are outside of themselves, people do it constantly and at their own expense. And at their own expense. I think as much as we maybe feel like we have to do something with our energy too, because the Nine of Cups is here. So there's very much an uptick. There's very much a surge. I think it's also a very good thing. It's a very building thing. Trust that you've, laid some sturdy foundation in the past. That even if you feel like you're scraping everything down to the bare bones, those bones are sturdy. Those bones hold knowledge and memory and porous material that retains water and knowledge and song and uh, will continue to assist you should you let it. So even 100%, even if you feel like you're just digging and digging and have dirt under your nails and you're not finding anything, trust that you have sturdy foundation, and perhaps that is a moment to understand that your foundation is perhaps anywhere you are, the ground below you and the sky above. Um, and And with that being said, anytime that I have moved, I cleanse the space and I will meditate in the space, um, so as to like really take in the place. For lack of a better term, it's like I open all of my bodily portals to it. Um, and to get to really know it. So it's a very intimate moment, but it's breath work and fundas and what have you. Um, and so in a new space, well, I guess there's two things that I'll do. In a new space, in a new moment, in a new element, um, I'll meditate with this space, in which case I'm just breathing. But with every breath, I'm also like I'm taking in my breath and I'm recognizing again the wave as it moves through my body and my awareness as it expands. Um, and with that, and with every breath, as I'm taking in the space around me. And so I'm opening my Mula Bandha and I'm allowing energy to, both enter and expand within that. And as I exhale and I close my Mula Bandha, or I close like the inguinal muscles that you would like use to stop your urine stream, or use to like kegel your genitals or move your genitals, um, then that will help me as I exhale, close my Mula Bandha and pull energy into me. So I get to intimately know the space that I'm in. And with every breath, as I expand my Mula Bandha, take in everything, close my Mula Bandha, take in everything. And with every breath, I'll go through maybe the layers of through the layers of the place that I live. So I'm not just going into the walls around me and into the floor around me. I'm going into what would be maybe the sediment and then the ceiling of the place below me. And then, down layers. And like, I'm not peering into anybody's, and you can't really see other people's places without prior knowledge, anyhow. Um, and just driving my attention into the foundation of the building, into the ground, and as far as my imagination will let me go, perhaps picturing copper wiring and what have you in the walls. um, Likewise, if that sounds like a lot of visual exercise, um, when you breathe at any given moment, um, when you are safe, you can close your, well, maybe not close your eyes. Is that what I want to do? Do I close my eyes? Yes, I do. I'm trying to remember what I do. I'll close my eyes and I'll expand my vision internally. Like, you see nothing, but you can see farther into nothing. Um, See farther and farther into nothing. Try and peer into the horizon of behind your eyelids while also expanding your sound. So you have, again, these elements of awareness expansion in all directions, like the beginning of the universe in and of itself. What's the farthest thing you can hear from you? What's the farthest thing farther than that? What's the next farthest thing you can hear from you? As simultaneously your eyes are closed, but your vision is perhaps uh, expanding within that depth. Well, right now you may be just aware of your eyelids being right upon your eyes. But if you look past that, are you aware that there's space in front of you? Are you aware that there's a wall in front of you? Are you aware of a draft? Are you aware of any, anything that might come up with eyes closed? Because your inner creativity is also a muscle. So, utilize this Mars energy to work out the brain and the creativity, maybe more so than the physical body. Not that the physical body doesn't need it. It also requires its own pattern. So rather than be caught in the fricative nature of rest and work, and or work and escape, which I think is very much fundamentally like designed to be that way, especially in certain countries, where work, 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 your livelihood depends on it. And when you aren't working, you have nothing to do other than drink or do drugs or what have you. Um, I think the system is very much designed to create that fricative nature. So recognize that, understand that, and question your decisions so that perhaps you can understand if it is uh, impulsive and instinctual, or if it actually rests within your intuition. Um, and I think there's multiple layers to this, because people will also conflate instinct to primal, and that is absolutely manipulated within the healing circuit. Um, so I don't know, put some respect on the animals and the animals' consciousness, and don't dumb yourself down, um, or hurt yourself, to attain this thing that is actually maybe the first thought. People think your instinctual thought is your first thought, is your animal thought. Maybe your instinct is your first program thought. Maybe your first thought is actually your intuition, which isn't even just your thought, it's collective consciousness, it's the web. um, and maybe that rests beneath what we think is primal nature, or what we think is instinct, or what we think is impulse, or what we think is intellect, even. All of these things are grasping at what intuition is holding. So understand that relationship, and allow yourself to ask questions to yourself and in general. Um, Especially with intensity of emotions, with this Eight of Wands at the bottom of the deck and this Queen of Spades. It's mental energy. Um, it's a lot of how we intellectualize our emotions. So when you are feeling particularly overridden with an overwhelming sense of any particular emotion. Oftentimes, for this, I said waves of grief earlier, anger, rage is very much part of this. Rather than act on it, rather than reconcile whether or not it's an impulse or intuition, um, ask yourself, sit with yourself, and ask yourself, what is this emotion? Like, name yourself, uh, where it is, and if you can feel it in your body, and what it wants. And allow yourself to sit with the response. Perhaps it'll come right to you. I feel like the more you practice meditation, the more and channeling, the more answers almost are answered before the question is even asked. But sometimes it can also just take a minute of you just sitting with yourself and seeing what really comes up. But absolutely, in moments like that, you can sit with your breath, expand your awareness, recognize those levels. Do you feel your breath north to south? Do you feel your breath expanding and contracting? Um, find this emotion, whatever it is, find where it resides, and ask it what it wants. And with that, I've had various different experiences. I've had various different experiences. Sometimes it's an emotion that is not yours. Sometimes it's an emotion that was not originally that. Sometimes it's an emotion that needs to be understood and placed mindfully rather than ignored altogether, um, because it gets louder if you do. And so, with that, my friend, I will leave you with that information because it is quite a bit. And I've given you maybe 3 different things to try on your own. Mindfulness, um, so that perhaps you can find some stillness in the water and some refuge in the heat. Appreciate you for coming and for vibing. And until next time, take care. Bye.